Hello and welcome to Shaking and Sipping. This is the show where we shake or today stir up a cocktail or other mixed drink, talk a bit about it, have a sip, see how it is. This week we're continuing our quest to work through each of the drinks on the IBA's official cocktail list to see how they stack up and just to enjoy them a bit. This week's classic mixed drink on the Unforgettables section of the IBA list is the Planters Punch. Now, we love to dig into the history of these drinks a bit. This one's a little bit tough. Drinks like punches go back quite a long ways. We discussed punches a little bit in the Collins episode and the Fizz episode, and these are really the only punches that are on the IBA's list. There is a drink with punch in the name coming way later that is not a punch. I don't know what that is, but perhaps sometime once we've gotten through the IBA's list, we'll go back and cover punches in more detail, but they are a broad class of drinks that both can be served in larger formats or as tall punches or single punches, which are what we're going to be making today, a single serving sort of punch drink. Now, the Planters Punch certainly comes from the general Caribbean area. Today we're going to focus on the Jamaican style. There's a lot of stories about where this drink goes to, some different specific bars who claim to have invented it, or at least that people think claim to have invented it. None of them are really true. This is an old recipe. It's written about very clearly under that exact name back in the 1870s in some London magazines, saying that this is a popular recipe in Jamaica. So it just floats around. It's a simple recipe. It's related to other punches. It's related to various naval drinks of the time. There really isn't a history to pin down here. What I think is interesting about it, though, is that this is one of the punches that spawned all of the punch rhymes, which no one can agree on. So probably the most common version of it is to say 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, and 4 of weak. And we'll talk about those components as we get into making it. But it's also sometimes 1 of sweet, 2 of sour, 3 of strong, 4 of weak. And one of the earliest write-ups on this drink, going back to the early 20th century, I think 1906, has a totally different, they don't do it as a rhyme, but they do write it out as those parts. And they write 1 of sour, 1 of sweet, 2 of strong, 1 of weak. So these are all over the place. They're supposed to be helpful to remember, I suppose, and catchy, but no one can agree on which one is which. So we're going to use 2 of those ratios today, as well as 2 slightly different methods of preparation as we build this. And finally, just to get the full sort of poetic version of that original one out, a wine glass with lemon juice fill, of sugar the same glass fill twice, then rub them together until the mixture looks smooth, soft, and nice. Of rum, then 3 wine glasses add, and 4 of cold water please take. A drink then you'll have that's not bad, at least so they say in Jamaica. I don't know why it ends with Jamaica, which doesn't rhyme at all with bad. Even in, any English accent I can think of, bad and Jamaica do not rhyme. So I don't know what's up with that, but that is one of our initial write-ups of it. So we're going to start, as usual, with the IBA spec version of the drink, mostly. There's a few weird things about the way in which they build this drink that I don't quite understand, but that's okay. We're going to press on. So their version is roughly 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, 3 of strong, and weak. So for the sour, that part's easy. In any of the type of recipes we're going to be looking at today, that means lime juice. Now, depending on where you're at in the Caribbean, depending on where you are in other countries that have taken this on, this could be any juices really you want to make different punches that are sometimes called Planters Punches. We're going to stick with more what probably they would have been doing in, the 19th century, especially in and around Jamaica and that region. And the IBA does that as well, though we'll get to a caveat there in a minute. So we are going to start with, in a glass without ice, which might sound weird, and we'll get to that as well, we need our sour. So we want 15 milliliters, or half an ounce, of lime juice. Then we are going to add to that 2 of sweet. Now, IBA here calls for sugarcane juice, which is a really uncommon product. There are some folks who swear by it for various health purposes. If you have like unpasteurized, unfiltered sugarcane juice, that can be healthful. I don't think that's true and don't recommend that. But other than that, it's not really a thing you can buy, so I'm not sure what they mean exactly. Most recipes around call for simple syrup, and most recipes from 1870 whatever call for superfine sugar. We're going to use Demerara Simple, my 2-1 Demerara, which I think is going to be actually a little bit too strong and sweet, but I want this flavor profile. So slightly against IBA, I'm going to start with just somewhere between 15 and 30 milliliters, so about 20 couple milliliters here. We can always add more later if needed, but the IBA recipe does call for 1 ounce or 30 milliliters. All right, next is 3 parts of strong, and by strong they mean the base spirit, which here of course is rum, and I think you want a nice Jamaican rum here. A lot of recipes out there call for Myers, and there's claims that the guy behind Myers is who invented this drink, which I don't think is true. You could absolutely use Myers in this, and it would be perfectly palatable. I don't think it would be very exciting, though. Myers is a fairly muted, kind of one-note product. Nothing against it in certain places, but I think you want something with a little bit of interest to it. So I'm just using the entry-level Appleton, the Appleton Signature it's called now. I still think of it as Appleton VX, but I don't know why they rebranded that iconic Appleton, but they sure did. But this is a Jamaican rum that is produced and grown on Jamaica. And so we want 3 parts of that, so relative to everything else, that's 1.5 ounces or 45 milliliters. So those are the main components of the drink, but of course, normally a punch has some weak in it, right? In most cases, 4 of weak. We don't have any here. We also don't have ice, which seems like it would be nice, and we also didn't shake it, so this is not cold. So IBA says to dilute it as desired with cold water, ice, or fruit juices. So you could bring in other fruit juices here for fun. I'm not going to do that. I have had some water in the fridge for a while and tossed an ice cube into it. So we're going to try to get our dilution sort of naturally with that. I'm going to start with 3 parts because they don't tell me how much, and I can be much easier to add more dilution later. So that's 45 milliliters or 1.5 ounces. And I realize this glass is vastly oversized for this, but I don't really have an ideal punch glass that's also good for building the punch in. So we're just going to stir that up. Now, I think adding ice to this would make sense, but the IBA's odd note of dilute with ice, I don't know what that means, so we're not doing that. And then for a garnish, they choose the peel of a lemon, which they don't ask you to twist, but I am going to. Ooh, got a nice bit of oil out of that. All right, and this is IBA adjacent spec of the Planter's Punch. It's good. We really don't need any more sweet, so again, maybe whatever sugarcane juice they developed the recipe with is less sweet than my standard 2-1 Demerara. But I don't think if you're using something like that, you do not need 30 milliliters of that. The 20-ish I used is plenty. So it's sweet, but it's sweet in an interesting way. The sweetness is really working with the lime juice to give us that tart flavor, right? Tart is what happens when sour and sweet mix. So it's tart, it's limey. The Demerara has those caramelly notes to them. And then the rum is just sort of poking out. So I could see this as a really great, hot weather, beachy sort of experience because it is boozy. You taste the rum. There's a little bit of funk that is just very characteristically rum. It's not quite a banana funk coming through, but it's everything leading up to a banana funk that's then sort of circumvented by just the lovely tartness. I'd sure like it to be colder though. The ice water did not help with that. I think flavor-wise it probably works better at this temperature, but I would assume I'm drinking these out of doors in the heat. I'd like this to be a little more chill. I was just reading the Appleton Estate bottle, and one of the flavor notes they call out is dried apricot. And I don't know that I'm getting that exactly, but that's adjacent to what I'm tasting. It's like a weird apricot, like an apricot that's maybe slightly overripe and then dried. Yeah, it's a cool flavor profile. All right, heading into our second version, we're gonna switch up quite a few things, though still staying, I think, in keeping roughly with the drink at hand. One change we're gonna make is adding some bitters. This is not in the earliest recipes, certainly, but you do see it show up in a lot of later recipes. And aromatic bitters are very common in other drinks that are inspired from the same area. Obviously, this is from Trinidad and Tobago, so not Jamaica by any means, but there is a long history of sort of, the West Indies, but specifically the British colonial occupation of the West Indies, driving a lot of rum and bitters connected products. So we're going to add in a dash or two of the classic Angostura bitters. And then this one, rather than doing 1 of sour, 2 of sweet, we're going to do 1 of sweet, 2 of sour. So we're starting off with half an ounce of my 2-1 Demerara Simple. And then we want 2 of sour, so that's going to be 1 ounce or 30 milliliters of our lime juice. Add that. Then we're still looking for our 4 of weak, so I'll use some of this water again. I'm going to do maybe just slightly scant of the 4. Yeah. So that's, 50 milliliters-ish. So 1 2/3 ounces, something like that, of water. And then of our strong. Now, again, you could use pretty much any rum here. I'm going to stick to Jamaica, but amp up the amount of craziness and funk going on. So I don't think this has shown up on the show yet. I know we've talked about it in some IBA and real lives where I've had this in drinks, but I don't think I've used it yet. Smith & Cross is one of my favorite products. It is a Jamaican distilled rum that for some reason is then shipped over to London by boat, and then is blended and further aged in London and then bottled and then sent back out. Don't really understand why they still do that, but they do, and it's a fantastic rum. It's got a lot of character to it. If you don't like a lot of character in your rum, you will not like it. And it's rather proofy. It's 114 proof, so it's a pretty strong product. I'm a really big fan of this product. My one other note on rums, I've seen several recipes call for a mixture of light and dark rums here. Now I don't like those titles because light and dark don't really tell you anything about the flavor profile, but what they mean from the context I've seen is they mean something like mix a Bacardi and a Myers. I think that would be a really poor choice in this drink. I think that's giving you something totally different. If you were gonna add in a lighter colored rum, I'd pick something deliberately to add some kind of funk, some kind of an agricole or something like that. I think adding Bacardi to this, you'd be better off just sort of making it daiquiri. And ice going in. Let's give it a shake. And I'm gonna strain that into a glass with some ice in it. Some folks call for crushed ice here. We'll definitely do a bunch of crushed ice later when we get into juleps and when we get into some of the tiki drinks. I don't think it's needed here. I don't want to drink this really with a straw, nor do I want to drink it as a like slushy. What I do want is a nice orange slice in the drink. I'm just going to toss that right in here. And this is a different ratioed, different spirit, add bitters, Planter's Punch. So that's cool. There's a little bit less of the Demerara richness going on because there's less of it in there, obviously. Still a little bit of that happens with the lime, but the lime is more present now. There is a sour thing as well as a tart thing. The whiskey is more of a slow burn, so you don't taste, the rum is more of a slow burn, so you don't taste that on the tip of your tongue or in the front of the entire tasting process. It shows up mid-palate. It starts to come up with some spice notes, a little bit of sugar notes, but in a dark, almost burnt sugar sort of way. Just a general weird funkiness happening, but it just slowly grows back of the tongue, into the back of the palate. I think the Angostura bitters are hitting right around that midpoint as well. I can't really pick them out, but it feels like something's happening there. I like it being much colder. I think the dilution's about right. I think you could go, you could go down a part or you could go up a part. Either way would work fine, just depending on how many of these you wanted to have and where you're at in your day. But I think this comes through really nice as something that is clearly alcoholic, but is not an alcohol bomb, but also doesn't just taste like you're sipping lime juice. Well, thanks for coming along with me today on this adventure as we looked at the IBA's version of a Planter's Punch as well as a variant thereon. This drink could really be anything. So if you're in the mood, think of one of those formulas, either 1 of sour and 2 of sweet, or 2 of sweet and 1 of sour, 3 parts rum of your choice, and then some water as needed to dilute it. You're going to enjoy it. Make it with whatever you have on hand. You can visit the blog at shakingandsipping.com, where we'll have a write-up on this and each other drink, as well as most weeks the day after this video posts, we'll have a write-up of IBA in the real world, where we go to a local cocktail bar and order the drink and see how it comes out, if they have any variants on it, if it's ordered a lot, etc. You can follow on Twitter at shaking_sipping for updates on when those IBA in the real worlds are coming out and other similar things. I would appreciate all the YouTube things like share, subscribe, comment, go watch everything else on my channel, then watch every other video on YouTube. All of those things would be greatly appreciated. I'll be back next week with the next drink on the IBA's official cocktail list. Until then, happy sipping. Cheers.